Celtics Beat is brought to you by Prize Picks and the Game Time app.
All right, everybody. Evan Valenti back with you here on a Friday the 13th. Celtics finally play a game. Feels like forever since we last talked. They've played two, lost to the Grizzlies. Big win. I would say big. No Jason Tatum, won by almost 30. In their Thursday bout with the Detroit Pistons, 123-99, your final score. A lot to get into. Welcome back, everybody, and welcome back to a guest who's on this show, but also on, I would say, probably, if I'm being honest with myself, Bobby, the most popular CLNS show that we have, and that's the Garden Report. Bobby, how we doing this Friday morning?
Good. Just got off that layoff, and now we got another one here. It's like one game over the next week, and it's against the Wizards.
Yeah, I know.
Honestly, Evan, I know we're not doing much cup talk, but I wish they were in it. Knicks, Bucks, Thunder. I'd rather be talking about those kind of games right now than a 30-point blowout.
And I get that. I totally get that. And like, this is one of the things that I think we've all sort of like kind of come to grips with. And I know Bear and I had this conversation. I know we've had this conversation on our show a bunch, but it's, you know, if they're in it, like, yeah, sure, I'm going to want them to win. But at the same time, it's like they don't really need this. You know, if we're really thinking about this season in the grand scheme of things, you know, maybe not playing those teams and playing the Wizards is probably better. Just so
I get it.
Less intensity, but at the same time, I get your point. We're not going to learn anything about the Celtics playing the Detroit Pistons and winning by almost 30. You're going to learn more when they play the Hawks, the Knicks, OKC specifically. You're going to learn a lot more about how good this team is and how they stack up against other teams. But I think at this point, Bobby, we're, 25 games in. I think we know what this team is, right? I think we've seen, bearing a huge injury, I think we've seen this team's really good. They're probably going to be, in the Eastern Conference Finals, NBA Finals, probably, and it's just a matter of matchups. And if they, they're really good. They're the best team in the league, and whether they play Oklahoma City or they play Washington, it's not going to change my mind.
Yeah, and there were a few wrinkles early in the season. Obviously, the Pritchard thing is going to be super interesting going forward, and that's a positive. The Kata emergence and that whole depth center conversation between he and Luke, I think that's another layer that I think is going to be interesting to watch as the year goes on, particularly depending on how healthy they are at the five. But the big one early was the defense. I wasn't crazy about the defense to start the year. You have that caveat, all right, Kristaps is out. It's going to be different when he's back. And I've liked how it's looked since he's been back. So all of those questions we had to begin the year and uncertainty about how they'd sustain without Kristaps. Obviously, Porzingis ends up coming back faster than anyone imagined. All of that worked itself out. I've liked the defense since he's been back. That Milwaukee finish last week was excellent, holding them to 1-12 down the stretch there, and the rim protection's gone into like the top five since Porzingis re-entered the lineup. So, yeah, they're who we thought they were. I think most of us felt like they were probably going to take a leap when they were fully healthy, and we haven't even seen them fully healthy much this year. There's been a lot of rests, a lot of bumps and bruises along the way, and last night, the latest example that no matter who's in there, they seem to play at the same level.
Yeah, that's the beauty of this team. They just seem to the next man up mentality. You hear a lot in football, right? When somebody gets hurt, because guys are always getting hurt in football. It's next man up here. No Jason Tatum last night. And insert the guy I wanted to start this podcast with, insert Payton Pritchard once again. The guy is absolutely unbelievable. Stat last night that Drew had mentioned during the middle of the broadcast. Pritchard now in this 7 of the last 8 games has 19 or more points. He's been unbelievable. Last night against Detroit, 10 of 20 from the field, 7 of 15 from 3-point range, 27 and 10 with a plus 22 in his 31 minutes on the floor. Start here because he's just been ridiculous this year. Where would this team be without Payton Pritchard? Because you look at preseason, right? One of the things I really liked about Lonnie Walker and his presence was, sometimes with some of these bench lineups, I get a little nervous about where does the scoring come from? If Jalen doesn't have it that night, or if Tatum's having a weird night and KP's hurt, like where is the scoring going to come from? And I thought Lonnie Walker would be a nice help with that. Payton Pritchard basically has made him like unnecessary. He's been so good. Again, last night, evident that his floor spacing, his shooting, his decision making, his playmaking has just all jumped up levels from last season to this season. So I ask you, Bobby, where the hell would the Celtics be without Payton Pritchard this season?
I don't think they'd be as good as they've been, certainly, because you look at what's happened. They've been off to a bunch of bad starts in these games, and last night was another example of that. 2 of 12 3-point shooting between the two teams, and Celtics were pretty much right down there with the Pistons in terms of how bad both teams were shooting out of the gate. He comes into these games, gives them energy, gives them baskets, whether he's off the ball or on the ball. And that interchangeability, that flexibility, I think is such a big part of his success now. He can lead units. He can be out there with the Tatums and Browns of the world and close games too, effectively playing off the ball. So that versatility is so important. And then I think of Hauser's limited availability this year. Those are really the only two consistent scoring options you have off the bench, and Hauser's missed quite a few games this year after playing 79 last year. So that's made him all the more important. They haven't had too many consistent bench guys offensively step up this year. They've had those show up in spots, whether it's a big Cade night or Drew Peterson surprising you with big minutes against Cleveland. But Pritchard's been that mainstay off the bench, and we've even seen a couple games where he's been out there to finish games. So he's emerged as one of their top five scorers this year. I don't think anyone could have imagined that, especially over a sustained stretch. In the past, it's been more up and down. And that consistency is the big factor with him. He's been good every game. He's been great every game, frankly. And it happened almost out of nowhere. We knew all these things he could do, the shooting, improved passing as time went on. Even the defense, you knew that was starting to get better last year. But now all three have reached a level where you're like, he's playing like a star. I mean, it's
And
mostly 3-point shooting, right? And I know he can get in between sometimes and finish, but it's such sustained high volume scoring and playmaking that you're like, is this? You don't want to compare it because obviously he's not leading the team, but there is some Isaiah to this. Like, you knew
yeah,
this
I did
guy
this
was
last week.
good,
Hmm.
but you didn't know how good he was.
Yeah, and it's getting into the paint stuff that I love a lot. Like that move last night where he got, I forget the defender that he got on his left hip and did like the slow-mo, like just slow it right down like Luca, how he's able to just decelerate and then just find balance with that one leg and just lay it off the top of the backboard and just for a nice easy kiss. It was late in the fourth quarter, I think it was last night. But his arsenal of moves is unbelievable. And the bully ball stuff in the paint is what really makes me laugh because like this is a guy who's clearly feeling himself, clearly enjoying playing basketball on this team. And you can see the confidence grow every single game he's on the floor. And I'm glad you brought up Isaiah. I brought him up last week. He reminds me a little bit of Isaiah of like, yeah, I'm only 6 feet, 6'1". In Isaiah's case, under 6 feet, but it doesn't matter who's in front of me. Like I have all the confidence in the world that this shot's going to go in, and you see the way he's able to space the floor. Like he's hitting shots from 30 feet, 28 feet. I know last night they had one at 25, and it was a complete joke. It was more like 30. He's taking
Yeah.
logo threes. And by doing that, he's really spreading the defense out to the point where, like, let's say they run a 1-5 pick and roll, and he's got beef stew on him all the way out at 30 feet. I mean, everything's open for everybody. So, like, as we
You're
talk
making me
about
think of
Pritchard,
that Chicago game too. Like, my jaw was on the floor, what he did in that fourth quarter.
he's unbelievable. He's been super clutch, absolutely massive. And he doesn't have, and I go back to last postseason against Cleveland in Cleveland, where he took that logo three with like, I don't know, I want to feel like it was early in the shot clock. I want to say like 15, 14 seconds in the shot clock. And Cleveland was making a run in that game. I want to say it was game 3. And he pulls up from like the parking lot and literally at the logo in Cleveland's arena and buries the shot. And I'm like, does anybody, this is going to get lost in the shuffle of this game because of how many possessions there are both ways. But that is such a monumental make to stop a run by Cleveland and like, let the air out of the balloon a little bit and give Boston a little bit of rewrite the ship, so to speak. Like his confidence at this point is unbelievable. And I sit here and look at where he was and where he is now is just a testament to the work ethic of the guy. And clearly Danny Ainge and the scouting department, when they drafted him, late in the first round years ago, they're like, no, this guy's going to be an important piece for us. They were absolutely right. And I know a lot of people were questioning the pick at the time because it was like, we need a small guard for. This guy's just been literally everything they could have asked for and more at this point in the season. I don't know how, again, I don't know where they are without him right now. In a team that's one of the best offensive teams in the league, like a big part of that is because Payton Pritchard's been ridiculous this season.
Yeah, and when you think of his pedigree in that draft, older guy who played 3, 4 years in college, you don't expect a guy like that to have a steady upward progression and the ceiling that we're seeing now through development, through a larger role, and just time spent here. And I do want to dive deeper into what he did over the offseason because he clearly is at another level. I think a lot of it, just looking at him, is uh, his body. I think he's much leaner. I think he's got more burst to him. I think there's just a greater athleticism to him this year, and especially the way he's been able to compete on defense. And he clearly got back pretty early, earlier than anyone, I think, to the facility there and just went to work. And that's who he's been since day one. Constant work, probably one of the higher work ethics on the team. He doesn't seem to care about too much else other than basketball. And it's just amazing to watch every night. It does seem like every shot he's putting up is going in at this point. It's unbelievable, and it's the story of the season. It's one of the best NBA stories to start this year. I mean, he's what, top 3 or 4 in threes made, and he's
Yeah.
got more than Jason.
Quick break from today's show to tell you today's show is powered by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in award-winning, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 200 times your cash. Run your game all season long on Prize Picks, and so many things makes Prize Picks great. But in my opinion, folks, all about flex play. Prize Picks invented flex play, which means you can still cash out even if your lineup isn't perfect. You double your money even if one of your picks doesn't hit. Nobody's doing that. With week 15 here in the NFL, a couple of important matchups I'm looking at, but I love Josh Allen this year. He's been unbelievable, so I'm going to use him. Derrick Henry is a freight train that can't be stopped. And against the Giants, are we kidding? Come on. He's going to score a touchdown. And then Devon Achane, I love him. I have him on one of my fantasy teams. He's been huge for me, especially with 2 in the lineup. So taking Josh Allen, Derrick Henry, Devon Achane, all to have more than a half a touchdown for 4 times your play. Again, Josh Allen, tough one, but he seems to want to run him in and be Superman every week. So, look, I'm going to ride the possible MVP here. Join now because this holiday season, Prize Picks is giving away 2 free picks in December, and they're giving away $30+ million in rewards during Pixmas. Download the app today. Use the code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, download the Prize Picks app today. Use the code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's Prize Picks. Run your game. If you look at his totals for as a Celtics is in his career, him getting to 500 threes last night in the span that he's done it in is ridiculous. And if you look at that list, like one of the things that jumps out is Ray Allen got to how many threes he got to in way less games than I remember. Yeah. But Pritchard's been unbelievable. I do want to throw this at you just because I'm not quite sure. I mean, it just helps demonstrate how insane Pritchard's been this year. This is going to sound so nuts, and I think I'm still kind of wrapping my head around it. Year 5, Steph Curry. Steph was 47% from the floor and was 42% from 3 on 7.9 attempts a game. He was 3.3 for 7.9 for the season. Pritchard this year, year 5, is 49% from the field and 43% on 8.6 attempts a game. And I'm not saying this because I'm like, he's Steph Curry, because he's not. We know that. I get it. But also, I think it helps demonstrate how unreal he's been when you're like, oh, yeah, he's having a similar season from 3-point range as the greatest 3-point shooter of all time. And so I just want to throw that out there at you and get your reaction to that because I'm still trying to wrap my head around that.
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me because I looked up a week or 2 ago and he and Curry were the only ones in the league shooting 43%. on the volume of threes that they were at that point. And again, Pritchard's right up there with the LaMelos, with the Tatums in terms of total threes made this year. And yeah, he's shooting most of his shots from three. I think about 70% of his field goal attempts are threes to start this year. But he has had more games recently where I think that balance has gone a little bit more in the 2-point direction. You mentioned the finishes inside last night, and Joe has praised his mid-range game. He does have that nice like 5-10 foot turnaround. So there are layers to his game that he's not just out there shooting threes, but that is the driving force. And obviously to be able to play in an offense where you're so free to get up threes in droves and you're encouraged to get up every open look that you can out there, it helps him. And I'm sure this Missoula offense has also helped him reach the level that he has out there. Because he showed signs under Ime, and that first Joe year, he was obviously buried under Brogdon. But even back then, we did a little video the other day here about how those heaves, and it's funny, that was like the story of his playoffs, the half court shots. Hasn't been too big a part of this year. I know he keeps taking them, but he hasn't made many. But that started that Brogdon year. They had him in against the Cavs in March. At the end of a quarter, they were able to throw it over the top to him and get a last second bucket. And they ended up going to that play late in that game, and he missed it. But Grant put it back and got fouled. And that was where that end of quarter play began, 2 seasons ago during that first Missoula year. And ever since, they've put Pritchard in the end of those quarters to just be able to use the speed. And he is so fast, too. That's the other factor that you got to talk about here. But Evan, I don't know if you remember, because I keep saying this right now because of the season he's had. He was gone. Like, they had him in a trade for Jakob Poeltl that
Yeah, I
year
know. It's unbelievable
after he
that
demanded the trade. Like, he could be in
it's
San Antonio right now, averaging 20 plus.
sliding doors moment right here. And again, I don't know where this is comes back to the question. I don't know where the Celtics would be without this guy, because they would certainly need Lonnie Walker, who, is still hanging around over here somewhere for some team like Denver or Boston or whoever to sign him, because again, I still can't believe he's not on a team right now, but we'll wait and see how the landscape shakes out. The one thing I do want to bring up, and I'm glad you kind of went here a little bit by bringing up like the half court heaves, because that's basically, by the time he got to the NBA Finals, like that's what he was. He was just like a special teams player. We kind of all joked about it. Is he the first special teams player in NBA history? Blah 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 blah. And so I asked this last week to Keith Smith and Adam, and I'm going to bring it here just to kind of keep the conversation going, get a different perspective on it. What concerns do you have about Pritchard as we head to the postseason, right? Because again, I keep thinking about, you go back to the Miami series and Jimmy Butler just trying to get Grant Williams in every single switch and just torturing him for an entire 7-game series. I keep thinking about that. And I keep thinking about Pritchard in that role of the clear weak point on a defense that they can pick at because of just his size. It's not because of trying. Pritchard tries his ass off every second he's in the game. There's no slowing down. He's obviously going, as fast as he can, as hard as he can for as long as he's in there. But I do have a slight concern about him holding up defensively in the playoffs as you get into the conference finals and the NBA finals against these teams who might be able to just pick at him like a scab on the floor. Look, Boston might be well equipped to switch and scram and help him out and get him out of there at disadvantageous situations. But, I'll ask you here, is there any concern going forward with Pritchard on the defensive side of the ball as they play some of these upper echelon teams?
Yeah, you have some just because of the size, and I don't think he held up as well in the finals in his minutes as Hauser did. I think Hauser was the surprise defensive standout in that series in isolation. The numbers were great for him, especially going up against Luka when they try to target him. And he's, 6'8" or whatever, so that makes sense. I like Pritchard's numbers to start this year. I love the competitiveness. I do love how they're able to get him out of those situations, as you mentioned. But, when he's in the game this year, and I don't think it's because of him. But obviously their offense goes up 7 points per 100 compared to when he's off, but their defense goes down, in the wrong direction, 12 points per 100 when he's out there compared to when he's off. And that's across the board for most of the bench guys. I think the second units have struggled more defensively, obviously having less center depth and, whatever other reasons you want to point to there. But I think generally they've kept him in that second unit role for pretty much this entire year so far. And obviously in the playoffs, you're going to be going against more first units at that point. So are you torching the other side on offense as effectively in those situations? And then defensively, are they able to go at you a little bit more? And he held up decently last postseason, but when it's a Butler going at you, when it's Giannis lining you up, like they'll do good things to counteract that. But sometimes it's just tough. Like I do think you saw it in that Bucks game last week when Giannis was able to line him up. Not much you can do there. And they do want to switch a lot. And that's going to be another question. Which scheme do they want to lean on when push comes to shove, depending on which lineup is out there? But the other thing, going back to Saturday's game that I think is going to be interesting, they handled the Porzingis Horford closing decision to finish games pretty well last year, and obviously Porzingis missed most of the playoffs anyway, so that didn't come up too often. But I do think you have a little bit of a, are you closing with Holiday or closing with Pritchard thing now? And I think that's another layer in playoff games where you're like, all right, Pritchard's rolling. The default's probably to just go to Holiday in that situation. Holiday's numbers offensively are a little down this year. So does that become an every game decision that you're making come playoff time, whether to go with Holiday or whether to go with Pritchard? It's been a decision already a couple times where they've gone with Pritchard, Memphis, Indiana earlier this year. So that's another one I think you're looking at come playoff time if these trends continue.
Quick break to tell you today's show is powered by Game Time. There's nothing better than going to a live game, folks. We all know that. So many core memories in my life built around going to some sporting event. Again, I remember going to the Paul Pierce KG reunion game at TD Garden. It was unbelievable. I'll never forget. I mean, if she's listening to this podcast, that's super cool. But the woman, I don't know what her name is, but she was crying profusely, holding up her Paul Pierce jersey on the Jumbotron. It was such a cool event. And now going to games like that is easier than ever, thanks to our friends over at Game Time. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier. They filter out all the BS to show you that all the incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Plus, you get all-in pricing. Again, you get to see everything you have to pay up front. There's no surprise fees when you check out, which is the most annoying part of doing anything like this, okay? You get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy, and if you find lower seats than Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets to Game Time. Download the Game Time app today, create an account, use that code CLNS, take $20 off your first purchase. Again, that is CLNS. After you download the Game Time app, you create an account, that's code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. What time is it? I'll tell you. It's Game Time. I'm so happy you win here. It's like you have the rundown, and even though you don't, like, 'cause this is what my next topic was going to be this, and I thought last night, Friday night, or Thursday night, excuse me, I thought this after Pritchard being, the main storyline, again, 27.7 outrageous offensive, performance this season. I thought the second biggest story last night, sneakily, was Drew Holiday kind of finding the level a little bit. That Memphis game wasn't a great look, just wasn't. I'm willing to throw out a bad game like that, after playing 5 games in 7 days, especially as a guy in Drew Holiday who's played a lot of basketball this summer, NBA Finals run and the Olympics. And it wasn't like like I said last week, it wasn't like he was Jason Tatum, not getting run. Like he was getting a lot of run every game,
right?
In high intensity minutes. I thought last night, Thursday night, was a huge, sneaky, nice performance from Drew Holiday, a well-rounded performance. He didn't light up the world. It's not like he didn't take a ton of shots. Only took 8 shots, but 4 of 8, 2 of 4 from 3, which is hugely important. 6 assists, 7 rebounds. He was back to not his old self, but what we're accustomed to seeing more often than not. He has been, as you said, like not as good offensively this season. That corner 3 is no longer automatic this year, where last year was like so laughable whenever he was open in the corner. I was like, let's go in. Like, don't worry about it. That's 3 points, no problem. And this is slightly concerning for me only because last year in the playoffs, he was their third best player. Like you can throw whoever you want at me. I thought Drew Holiday was significantly important in the playoffs with Kristaps being out for so long. I thought Drew really stepped up I thought his offense was huge defensively. Obviously, the steal against Nemhard is going to just live in Celtics lore forever. But getting Drew kind of back on track, this is kind of the big storyline for me going forward is what do they do with his minutes? What are they doing to keep him fresh? What are they doing to make sure that because we always talk about Kristaps Porzingis, we always talk about Jason Tatum, we talk about Al Horford. I think Drew Holiday is sneakily like a little bit more important than I think we're giving attention to. And again, last night after him being left wide open all game against the Grizzlies, like him kind of coming back to the mean a little bit here was a huge storyline for this team. And as we look towards the future, like making sure he's okay, I think is super important.
Yeah, just knowing that nothing lingered out of that shocking performance on Saturday, because that could be something that shakes you a little bit. And there was a moment in that game, the Detroit game, where he has the ball in the wing, feels like he's hesitating for a moment, and then he pulls up and hits it. So he had a good game overall, played within the flow. And the most important thing is, are the defenses still respecting him? And it was rare to see. I know he said after that defenses leave him a lot, and maybe in help, maybe in rotation, but to just play off him, I don't feel like you've seen that ever really with like that's not a guy you look at and say, yeah, he can't shoot. So I think that helps you feel better about that is that one, he's gonna hit those more often than not, I think, when he's left open like that. I think it shocked the Celtics a little bit. I think it threw them and him off, the way Memphis played that and the amount of shots that he had to put up. And I still look back on it and say, generally, I think it was less about, oh, they're leaving him open and more about, oh, this guy who doesn't usually do a lot, doesn't take many shots, doesn't have the ball in his hands a ton, suddenly had the ball in his hands all game and had to make a lot, all right, shoot, drive, difficult decisions with the ball in his hands as the lead facilitator on the team. But uh, I looked at that and said, all right, this is, I think, more of 5 games and 7 nights. Drew obviously missed a couple games before that, so I think he's dealing with some stuff here, and maybe that's part of the shooting decline that we've seen to begin this year because I think he's a great shooter. Just watching him day in and day out, I think he has a consistent form. I think his track record speaks for that too. But it does raise an interesting proposition. Obviously, Detroit wasn't going to be able to do it, but a team like Memphis that has Jackson who can disrupt in the middle and roam on defense, they can play two bigs. There's just some defenses out west that I think are so much more versatile than what the Celtics have seen out east so far. And it's been a relatively easy schedule, I'd say, for the Celtics, mostly playing east teams to start this year. Memphis, it was a little bit of a ramp up in terms of intensity and the caliber of a team and caliber of a defense that they had out there. You think of the Warriors too and what they were able to do, trapping Tatum in that first game of the year that they ended up winning. So yeah, I'm interested to see them play some more West teams into this winter stretch here and just see the defenses out there, the quality of teams. Because, I just don't think, as good as the Celtics have been to begin this year, I don't think they're in a league of their like I like what the Thunder are doing. We'll see what happens with Golden State and Jimmy. Like I think that could be an intriguing team if everything comes together there. Denver, still hard to quit on them with Jokic playing at the level he is out there. So I think there's a lot of intriguing stuff going on in the West, but as we always say, you don't have to worry about that till the finals, fortunately.
Yeah, and that's the thing with the C's team. And I think they reminded everybody last night. It's like, yeah, we lost the game. Oh well,
Right.
we're gonna
And
blow
that's
you
how they
guys out.
approached it.
Yeah, it's that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, you can learn some things, and from a
Yep.
loss, you can learn a little bit more about what defenses might do to you as as you advance and progress into the playoffs and things. But I think the Celtics have handled themselves really well, and I think it's funny because I think a lot of guys have just flat out gotten better. Like I think Tatum's gotten better. I think
Yep.
Pritchard's gotten better. I think Derek White has gotten better than he was last year. I think there's just more consistency there. Like they've just raised level across the board. And
Derek.
yeah, I go ahead.
Derek's been unbelievable this
Yeah.
year. I mean, you could argue him as an all-star.
Yeah, and this was last year too. We had the same argument of like Derek White should be an all-star, and this year you can make the same case. I mean, Boston and Cleveland could basically form the majority of the Eastern
Yeah.
Conference offensive team. Like that like just to be honest with you, it's one of these things where you have Mitchell and Mobley and Tatum, Brown, White, and then like you could throw probably You know, I throw Cat in there. He's having a tremendous offensive season. You know, could throw Brunson in there. Like you could field the entire Eastern Conference All-Star team with like three teams, and
Well,
then
they're
the
doing
West.
4 teams this year, right? So maybe one should just be the Celtics, maybe one should be the Cavs, and then, whatever East, they're doing the Rising Stars thing too. So maybe
Right.
there's just one West team and one Rising Stars team.
Yeah, it's an abundance of riches here. And again, the rich keep getting richer. But, you know, as you look across the landscape of the Eastern Conference, like I just, it's kind of boring. Not gonna lie. Like a lot of like last year, I people, we'll wait to the playoffs with the playoffs. And I just kept telling people like don't do that. Like enjoy the ride of this season. This is really fun. This is like or this is so new and the way they're doing things like is so different than what it's been in the past. Like Chris Kristaps really added a whole new element to this thing. This year I do find like kind of boring. Like I'm just like, this is like last year as they progressed late into the season, I got to the point of like, I only care when they play Denver because that's when I learn things about this team. When they play an upper echelon team like a Denver or a Minnesota or a Dallas, like I'm not learning anything when they play, the Bulls or Washington or Charlotte. Like this is a joke. Like
Yeah, they're just
this
trying to
isn't
get
fun
by.
basketball. And
Yeah.
I feel like I'm here again. It's like they played Detroit last night, and I love watching Cade Cunningham. That was awesome. I'm a big Cade guy. I've held all my Cade stock. Ron Holland, even though it was against third stringers, was like, I'm still out here. I'm still.
Yeah.
He kept going at Boston. I loved that. That was fun. But like, I don't learn anything watching this team play Detroit. Like we have to watch because that's what we do for a living. But at the same time, like I'm with you. Like I want to play some of these West. I want to play Houston, right? I want to
Well,
see
get
them play
ready.
Houston. I want to see
That
them play
first,
Golden State again. They haven't played Denver yet. They haven't played Oklahoma City yet. They haven't played
yeah.
Dallas yet. Like, oh, I can't wait because then you really learn about where this team really sits. Like, I think they're the best team in basketball. There are only a few teams that will be able to test them to prove my theory wrong. And yet they've only really played one of them. That was Golden State. And that was kind of a weird game too. So
Hey, don't sell Memphis short either. I think, Synergy put it out, there's 7 teams, or there were 7 teams at that point that qualified because 44 of the last 45 champions, as they said, had either a top 7 offense or defense and no lower than 18 on the other side of the ball. And that's actually a concern for the Knicks right now because their defense has not been great to be in this year, as good as their offense has been. Their offense has been better than the Celtics for a lot of this year. But they were intriguing to start this year. You're always looking at the Bucks and saying, all right, what's going on there? And I'll still give them some credit because they were up, double digits, I think, in this on all 3 of those games against the Celtics and
they're
ended up
definitely
squandering it.
better than they were when they started the year. I've been very encouraged as a guy who maybe wrote the Bucks off a little too early. They've definitely played better. Their perimeter defense is still like, but
Yeah.
they're starting to find who their guys are. Like AJ Green's been unbelievable. Like he's
Oh,
just
yeah.
been, I don't know where they
I
do without
love
AJ
Andre
Green.
Jackson too, UConn
Right.
guy, obviously.
Yeah. So they have a little bit more of my respect. And again, with Giannis, they're always going to have a shot. But again, the rest of I just like they don't but even with Milwaukee though, like Milwaukee hasn't won a game in Boston since 2022. It's going to be 2025 by the time they get to do it again, possibly. So it's like I look back at the game. They played the Bulls a couple of weeks ago, and the Bulls got everything they wanted against the Bucks. Like they just don't have a perimeter. Like if you have good guards or good wings, like the Bucks, not really that scary because they can't defend anybody on the perimeter at all. So again, that's where
And no
Jackson kind
one
of
can
comes into play.
And no one can seem to match their shooting. That's the one thing. I'm looking at the box score every night and just seeing the 3-point advantage build up for Boston. And I look at the other team almost every time and I'm like, no one can keep up with this. Not even making as many, and some teams do. The Pistons almost matched them last week in a tougher game on Boston.
Bulls coming
But
up. They might. Bulls can
yeah, I
do it.
know, and they did a great job. Yeah, so there's a handful of teams that are getting used to playing, shooting that many threes because it does feel unnatural for a lot of teams. I know. I think was it Brunson? Yeah, I think Brunson on before opening night said the league's going to start to follow the Celtics with this stuff. They're going to see what they did, try to emulate it, and I don't think too many teams have done a great job with that. It's at least going head to head with them. So that's the advantage that the Celtics have every night. And I know that was a big takeaway for them after that Memphis game was like, all right, you were able to do this for one night, play with that holiday thing, but over a 7 game series, and obviously no game went more than 5 games for them last postseason. Doesn't seem like there's a team out there that can play the 3-point game with them, or at least very few. So that's another thing they have going in their favor. Maybe, I'm interested to see the Knicks matchup if they can get back to full health and that thing comes around later this season. But I still don't see the Knicks being able to beat them. The Cavs are the team, right? They've steadily been up there with them all season so far. They have the imposing interior defenders along with a good perimeter scheme. I think there's a coach that's as analytically driven as Joe there who can, manage the numbers and all that they have to deal with over the course of a series. And I do think last year, when the Celtics were sizing up the East and how all the teams were looking, regardless of what the standings were, just matchups and, how teams are looking analytically, I do think they looked at the Cavs last year and said, that's the most challenging team we'll see in the East. And then you get to that series and Allen's out, Mitchell goes down, and still ended up being pretty competitive for a 5 game series, or yeah, I think it was five, right? So that one will be interesting, especially, could Cleveland get home court? They've been that 1 seed all year. Can they
Yeah, but
keep
if
up
you're
that
Boston,
pace? And
are you afraid of that? They won a ton of games in the row in the playoffs last year. It's like I don't think
yeah,
that really
right.
matters for them. You prefer to have it in your own building if you have to play game 7, but I think this team's kind of too mentally tough for that. I don't think that really matters as much. But
No, and I
the,
don't think they're going to sell out to try to get it. So they might end up being the 2 seed.
yeah, and we had Keith on last week, and his point with Cleveland was like it's good that Boston has this like carrot in front of them,
Hmm.
like kind of stay the pace with Cleveland, not to get too far behind in the standings because like they can't like rest on their laurels at all. They have to keep up with Cleveland to, try and
Right.
get that
Last
one
year,
seed.
you're up like 15
Yeah,
games
who
on second.
cares? Yeah, it's like who cares? Like what is going on here? But
That was still so crazy. There was a lot of crazy stuff last year, so that one kind of gets buried, but they were the 1 seed by like 15
yeah,
games.
it was embarrassing. We'll get you out here quickly on this last thing here, Bobby, and it's we kind of already started talking about it, and again, I look at this team and we all say health, 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 health. It's all about health as long as they're healthy. Like nobody's beating this team. And you look going forward as we try and assess where they're at over a quarter through the season. Trade deadline rapidly approaching. Obviously, Boston can't do a whole lot in that regard, but other teams can. Is there anything that concerns you about Boston? I know before it was the rim defense. KP's come in and fixed that, no problem. Is there anything else that concerns you with Boston and the way they're playing right now and how it bodes for their postseason success?
I do think they've missed Hauser, to go way down the roster, obviously. But you remember, Hauser had an outsized role in the finals, played 79 games last year, was 42, 43% from three, along with the defense throughout the year. And that's pretty much your only backup wing in terms of guys who have been reliable and consistent throughout their careers. I like that they've given Jordan Walsh a chance to start this year. And offensively, he just had, talk about getting ignored. Like defenses just don't acknowledge him out there, and he hasn't been able to make them pay yet. And it kills me. He got another chance yesterday and just couldn't take advantage of it. So that one's tough. And I know he's still 20, and I still believe in him, but it doesn't feel like he's going to be able to impact them if Hauser's out throughout this year. And Drew Peterson, massive surprise. I didn't think he was going to factor in at the NBA level for Boston ever, but he comes into that Cleveland game and looked 100% ready to go. So I do want to see them continue to get him more looks. I thought he was okay in the Detroit game last night, not as good as the first 2 games, but you don't have a ton of wing depth behind Hauser right now. And Hauser dealt with the back thing. Feels like he's continued to manage that throughout the year. Missed his last game with an adductor strain. So it's been an injury-plagued year to some degree for Hauser so far. And I do feel like when he's out, and obviously when there's another wing out or Horford or whoever it might be in that front court, they're scratching for wing minutes into those second units, and it culminated in them playing Caden Cornett together against Memphis late in that game, and I was like, what's going on here? So if they can find a wing, I know they can't go to the buyout market, so there's so many different limitations here in terms of being able to add one, but we've seen the reports. He doesn't seem to get involved ever at this point, so with that $4 million Springer contract, what can you do with that? You have some seconds at your disposal, maybe even a first if there's a guy you really like. And I know they don't want to add too much to the tax here, but whether Peterson's able to fill in at that spot and maybe convert to the 15th roster spot if he succeeds there, or they need to go out and add a wing because Hauser's not available consistently. I do think that's the only roster thing you're looking at the rest of this way. They're great at center. Point guard depth seems fine. So I'm looking at the wing spot for sure.
Yeah, I agree with that for sure. Hauser being just a knockdown shooter last year and having a little bit of, he hasn't been consistent this year, and he's a good shooter. Like, we know it. Like, it's just
I think
obviously
it's the health.
Yeah, it's the back, and managing him, getting him right. Again, this is just going to be what this team does for the next couple of months. Just make sure everybody's right, and standings want to stay top 2 if they can, but at the end of the day, making sure everybody's healthy and firing on all cylinders is going to be the most important thing. That's Bobby Manning. You can see him on the Garden Report. You can read him at CLNS Media, Boston Sports Journal too as well, right? We got a couple of different things going on.
Saturday, so we'll have something coming tomorrow.
There you go. Excellent. Make sure you follow Bobby on Twitter, on X, excuse me. You're on Blue Sky?
Yep.
Can I be honest with you?
Been pretty active over there.
I thought it was Blue Ski, not Blue Sky at
I
first.
like Blue Ski too. Yeah, I wish that was the
Blue
pronunciation.
I felt like such an idiot, and I was like, "Oh yeah, Ev, it's Blue Sky, you moron." I'm like, but Blue Ski sounds fun.
Better. Yeah,
I'm with you. We're gonna be pro Blue Ski on this podcast for sure. But for Bobby Manning, again, catch him on the Garden Report. He's all over the place. It's one of our best shows, not our best show. As much as I love our show, those guys are cranking. No turtleneck, no hard hat, no nothing today though, Bob. We got you in like a nice
get
like
a turtleneck. I think we got a get together coming up soon, so I'm gonna make sure Jimmy brings one for me because I don't have one right now. I got my phenomenal hat. Where's that? Here we go.
There you
Little
go.
Garden Report merch right here.
Yeah, we love it. We love it. A little cross promotion. Look at that.
Don't have a hard hat right now, so
perfect.
We'll get one.
For Bobby Manning, I'm Evan Valenti. We'll see you guys next week. Make sure you subscribe to the Garden Report and to Celtics Beat on iTunes, on Spotify. CLNS Media is all over YouTube. Make sure you subscribe there. Bobby, thank you very much. We'll be looking for you Saturday and more stuff from CLNS Media. Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Evan.